Hello, everyone who's joining.
Hello,
Hi, Vivian. How are you?
Hi, Vivian.
It's great to see you guys again. And for the new ones, it's good to see you here as well.
We're still waiting for a few of the speakers to join. Is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, cool. Maybe give them a few minutes.
Okay, we still have a few people joining as we speak, but given that it's very early for some of you and very late for others, and we want to respect the time you have made, I would suggest we start. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this second webinar of our community of practice on enabling the business transition to the green economy. As we start, I would like to particularly welcome all the members of the community of practice, as well as our partners and all the representatives of the private sector who are joining this webinar today. Today we have with us, looking at the list of participants, I see we have people from Bhutan, Kazakhstan, Thailand, Colombia, and I believe also Ecuador, Chile, and Korea joining us tonight, or this morning for some of you. Welcome to all of you. As you know, this community of practice is convened by the government of Colombia, together with the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, who I have the pleasure to represent today, together with my colleague Vivian, and we will take you through the webinar today. Before we start, let me just point out a few rules of engagement for this webinar. We have English, Spanish, Spanish-English live interpretation. You can join this by clicking on the little globe symbol on the bottom of your Zoom screen, as also shown on the slide. In the interest of our interpreters, please speak slowly and clearly. And as always on Zoom, please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and do please turn on your camera it will give the whole webinar a bit more of a community feel and make it more interactive for everyone. Please turn your cameras on now. Throughout the presentations, please feel free to ask questions and share any comments at any point. Please use the chat function for this. We can already collect any questions there throughout the pitches and the presentations, and then we'll have dedicated sessions for question and answers and discussions afterwards. The webinar tonight, or this morning for some of you, will feature speakers from 2 of our community countries. This is Thailand and Colombia. Now we'll start with presentations from representatives of the private sector. We'll have a Q&A after. Then we'll take a short break. And after that, we'll have pitches from some of the business leaders at the forefront of the green transition, which will be followed by a group discussion. Now I'll hand over to you, Vivian, and let's get started. Vivian, you're on mute.
Vivian.
Very sorry. Okay, yeah, so thank you very much, Elena. And without much delay, I would actually like to invite our first speaker of today, Mr. Ruben Gonstein. I hope I'm pronouncing it more or less correctly. Is the Director of Sustainable Production and Consumption at the Asociación Nacional de Empresarios de Colombia, or in English, National Business Association of Colombia. ANDI is an association that brings together a significant percentage of companies in diverse sectors in Colombia. And it's a pleasure to have Mr. Gonstein today with us to talk to us a little bit about private sector action towards a net zero economy. So Ruben, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vivian. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to be here. I'll continue and go directly to the presentation. So let me share my. I don't have permission to share my screen. Can you let me do that? Okay, perfect. Please confirm when I can do that. When you can see my screen, please.
We can see your screen.
Perfect. I'll put this on mode presentation. Good. Well, so I'm going to briefly present in 10 minutes some actions towards the net zero economy. So, Andy, as there are people here who don't know what it is, this is the National Business Association in Colombia. We represent the private sector and we interact with different stakeholders across the country. This is with academia, with the international community. This is the Pacific Alliance, the OECD, and different frameworks worldwide. Also, we interact with the civil society and the public sector. The ANDI exists around 78 years ago. We have around 1,500 members, affiliates from different sectors, either from steel, from textiles, from concrete, from beverages, from consumer packaged goods, etc., etc. And these companies that are affiliated to ANDI represent around 50 to 55% of the GDP of the country. So jumping into the actions that the private sector implements on the ground, let's say the companies are facing increasing pressure from consumers, civil society, shareholders, and institutional investors to set and implement mitigation targets, and these are interim targets and that are consistent with the 1.5 degrees pathway. There are multiple initiatives in this ecosystem, different frameworks, and the level of exposure has increased, aiming transparency and disclosure. There are current national mitigation and adaptation targets that are reflected on the NDC. These targets are also part of the exercise of the companies who are setting up their own targets, including biodiversity tangible commitments. And this is done through our Center of Biodiversity and Water in ANDI. Then we try also to foster an increased ambition, and this is something quite important, especially since the 1.5 degrees pathway is very difficult to achieve. So the idea is to bolster climate action mitigation outcomes, including adaptation actions. And quite important, with boots on the ground in territory. And the idea is try to decentralize our activities and try to be on the ground and on territory areas, or let's say regions in which there are many things to do. So there are more among companies who have setting up their own zero targets, around 400,000 entities across the world, around 1,181 with net zero targets. And of course, the idea is that they are pretty much increasing because of the level of exposure, what I mentioned before. At the end of 2021, around 2,300 companies across 70 countries and 15 industries that represent 1/3, this is around $38 trillion of global market capitalization, has approved emissions reduction targets or commitments with the Science Based Targets initiative. So quite a few examples. Climate Action Tracker, they have a platform in which they follow up through different frameworks and policy frameworks as well. Comprehensiveness of this net zero target design. Another platform, the Net Zero Tracker, and as Andy, and especially through our interaction with different organizations, we have participated in the Integrity Matters as a non-entity state actor. We participated in the Net Zero Commitments by businesses, financial institutions, cities, and regions that was published by the high-level champions in the latest CoP. The same with the net zero guidelines that we participated, accelerating the transition to net zero. This is one of the guidelines with from the ISO. And of course, as you can see below, there are many, the cumulative numbers of listed companies with some types of net zero targets. I'm not discussing on going into details about how effective are or how tangible these commitments are, but the idea is that the numbers are growing. And of course, not only in terms of net zero targets, but also in terms of the SDGs and how these ESGs articulate with the net zero targets. And of course, as you can see here on the upper part, a special company like Grupo Nutresa, this is the top one company in the world in the SP 500 companies who are listed as gold list and gold class as one of the most sustainable countries in the world. So some of the actions, of course, the companies are quite different. There are different standards that they follow. Either this is the MSCI, this is with SASB, this is with GRI, and multiple strategies depending on the sector. Also depending on the sustainability maturity profile. Of course, there are certain companies who have a sustainability department, and some others that they are starting just in this pathway to start and present at least carbon neutrality targets or even reduction targets. And of course, also depends on the financial strength and readiness to shift current models. Now, this is quite important just to take this decision and take this leap of faith in order just to respond to sustainability and how this ecosystem is evolving quite rapidly. So companies at Andy, we try to pretty much be aligned to what the NDC means. This is for 2030 and 2050. This is the 51% reduction on emission reductions for 2030 and projected to 2050 to be carbon neutral. Different strategies, as you can see in the upper part, in the lower part, sorry, there are different strategies, either direct decarbonization, path to carbon neutral, net zero emissions, or beyond net zero emissions. And the idea is that the companies are using different strategies, and this is quite important. Some of them are using compensation offsets. We try to recommend that the compensation offsets on these voluntary carbon markets are also evolving and try to be pretty much aligned to the regular market. So the idea is that they compensate more than 10%. Also in Colombia, and there's a very high potential of nature-based solutions strategies, and especially to be implemented on territory. There is a carbon market interest to channel finance to sustainable land use and co-benefits, especially because of the sector that is the most emitting one is the Afolu sector. This is around 60% of the emissions in the country. So the idea is that through the MVS strategies, of course, we try to address the drivers of deforestation, but of course there are barriers and there's a lot of uncertainties at policy level, especially as we can foresee for next year. We have been elected or selected in the latest climate scope as top 5 of the most attractive countries for renewable energy investments. And so we are the second ones in Latin America after Chile. So this is also quite important, not only in terms of sustainability strategies, but also in terms of how the matrix is evolving and changing. And as I mentioned before, of course, there are different strategies that the companies are using at different standards, but of course, the effort towards harmonization of these standards has been done through the International Sustainability Standards Board, and this is also quite applauded and quite welcoming, and as this is quite relevant for us. Some fronts and challenges that we have, of course, we're waiting to participate either in the independent stock, in the global stock stake, sorry, and the idea is that, of course, these recommendations that are coming, especially within the Paris Agreement, of course, they are going to present some recommendations that we can participate and also we can contribute from the private sector. Also, in terms of carbon disclosures and let's say climate risk disclosures, this is quite important for us to be really transparent. And there are different methodologies that are actually being on the ground, let's say, especially, this is the black box of everyone, especially for Scope 3. As we can see on the right side, of course, Scope 3 is quite different depending on the sector. So we are putting a lot of effort towards how to quantify and how to address upstream and downstream Scope 3 quantification. So this is also for us one of our top priorities. And of course, the idea is that we are looking to improve and develop more precise accounting methods, especially across different supply chains. And this is quite important because if we try to set an example, we try to go upstream, especially for selected value chains that are linked to deforestation. So the idea is that we try to work on the hotspots of deforestation and then try to design a common strategy within the companies at Andy. Of course, as I said before, there are different frameworks as you can see on the right side, especially this is quite confusing for a lot of people, as this is for carbon footprint, this is for carbon credits, this is for reporting, this is for marketing. So the whole, let's say, taxonomy is sometimes a bit of a mixture. So we try to, of course, facilitate the understanding and try to explain which one might be the best according to your own capacities. And of course, depend on what you're looking for. So the idea is we try to, we don't say, look, you try to follow this framework, you have to follow this methodology. We try to discuss and reach a common ground to say, you do whatever it fits to your own capacities, as you know, as I mentioned before. So the idea is that we're trying to design cost-effective tracking system for corporate and government commitments. These are, of course, quantitative disclosure per scope, sector materiality, interim net zero targets, and of course, KPIs based on concrete and tangible decarbonization actions. And what I'm trying to say is we try to reduce the blah blah and try to put more efforts towards actions, especially through pilot projects, or even we'd say, okay, if there's a project, we jump right away. We try also to support these legal standards and some regulations because, of course, the idea is to try to generate clear guardrails to ensure net zero progress and to address confusion and facilitate consistency. And this is something that we have been seeing, especially in the UK, through the SEC in the United States, and also at the EU level, especially through these frameworks that are trying to put up the bar, especially for certain value chains. And of course, we tried also to promote, and also the programs and the projects that we design through, or let's say from Andy, we tried that these projects are subjected to high quality and independent audits, especially for quality assurance and quality control. Also to be validated by third-party audits, that this is quite relevant for us. So next steps, of course, we try to promote this fair transition. Of course, in the left side, this is our, let's say, our future, or let's say our ideal solution, let's say, to design strategies to net zero, especially the urgency of net zero, especially to address the front-loaded emission reductions. Then, of course, try to broaden the scope of action, and then especially the integrity. Integrity matters, especially as you have seen in many different frameworks, high quality offsets or high quality net zero targets. This is quite relevant. And how do you define high quality, especially through different taxonomies? And the idea that we try to homogenize these definitions that we understand. And of course, consistency, especially with the SDG agenda to 2030, and of course we try to be aligned also with this agenda, but of course with tangible actions, and we try to, let's say, relate targets and indicators, especially with KPIs. Of course, as the Paris Agreement says, we need to be explicit about the need of equitable transition and national circumstances, and of course, as we know, transition is not going to be fair for all the countries. And the idea is that we try to do as much as we can based on our own needs and our own capacities. We're also waiting to operationalize this Article 6 that was deferred to COP28, and especially to different transition to net zero pathways. Of course, as I said, closing the gaps in climate finance, technology and capacity buildings. And of course, these net zero plans must broaden the spectrum of to cover ecosystem services, and especially many stakeholders that have been, let's say, isolated historically, and they must participate, especially to design common actions. In terms of adaptation, and this is something that we try to, let's say, put it on the national context. How can our business actions for climate change adaptation can be designed? So we try to focus on 3 pillars: enhance resilience, capitalize on opportunities, and shape collaborative outcomes. And this is something that I presented in one of the first slides. So we try to interact with all the different stakeholders in that national and international level, try to advance simultaneously, and try to discuss which actions are going to be the ones who are going to generate more impact. And of course, as Antonio Guterres said, adaptation and mitigation must be pursued with equal force and urgency. So our, let's say, focus on mitigation must be, let's say, displaced and try to be set up on the same level of adaptation, especially in Colombia as one of the top vulnerable countries across the world. So we must be aware of this. So in a nutshell, net zero is more than decarbonization, and this is quite important, not only in terms of design targets, but also in terms of understanding the whole system. All sectors and geographies will need to undergo transformation if the net zero targets are to be achieved. And this is not something for selected countries. This must be pursued by all countries. Supporting net zero must come from different fronts, and not only in terms of mitigation, adaptation action, but also in terms of circular economy, in terms of biodiversity and watershed management, etc., etc. A whole set of opportunities, markets, and ecosystems are opening up for low emission products and resilient, flexible supply chain. And this is quite important because we are experiencing right now that we are evolving from this era to a new one. And if we didn't experience this through COVID and how these supply chain situations have evolved, then we must evaluate ourselves and say, okay, what are the lessons learned and how can we, let's say, go to the next era? So new value chains are going to be generated. Some sectors are going to be, let's say, put aside, and then the new ones are going to come up. And let's say, Andy, through, let's say, the Chamber of Entrepreneurship and Acceleration, and beyond the future, we are working on different methodologies, either Internet of Things, MRV, different, let's say, strategies with all these startups and organizations that are, let's say, coming up to this these new, that are trying to face these new challenges. We must put a lot of the decisions and responsibilities on the shoulders on the CEOs and the management board, because they have to own the sustainability agenda to lead purpose-led transformation. And especially after COVID pandemic, business leaders must engage, and the ones who engage early are most likely to achieve successful transition. And of course, foster private sector mobilization and engagement is needed, but policy uncertainties and capacity building must be addressed at national and international level. And I'm not talking also about Article 6. I'm not also talking about how it's going to be designed, the loss and damage fund, as we have seen at the latest COP, but also in terms of national level, how these policies and this uncertainty are going to respond to these new challenges, but also try to keep the balance, especially with the private sector and the public sector. We must reach consensus and try to interact. And finally, frameworks, homogenization, and avoid duplication of work and take advantage of current infrastructure is top priority. This is something that we need to work on. Let's say at policy level, governments must work on the work previously done by the predecessors, and of course we need to work on many different fronts. And of course we need to avoid duplication of works and try to reach common consensus with the different actors at the private sector level. And also this is also quite a challenge for us, because the organizations, they have their own agenda. So the idea is that, of course, if we try to avoid this duplication of work, we can of course move a bit faster. Yeah, thank you so much. I think I kept it to my slot. And yeah, thank you so much again for the invitation, and questions, feel free to make them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Robin. And to all the participants, we will have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask the speakers, you can write them on the chat, or whenever at the end when we have the Q&A session, you can raise your hand and ask questions. Next, we will have Mr. Daniel Mitchell. Daniel is the Chief Executive Officer at Acoplásticos Colombia. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the sustainability efforts in this very important sector. So without much further ado, Ms. Daniel, the floor is yours. If you would like to use the slide, you might share your screen as well.
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Vivian. Thank you very much for this invitation. Hi to everyone. I see we have participants from all over the world in different time zones, so I think that's very exciting. I'm going to talk a little bit about the plastics industry in particular, which is the sector that we represent at Acoplásticos. And I think it's a very interesting sector because it has huge challenges, especially in sustainability. And those challenges should actually become opportunities for the green economy or the green growth. And I think to address these issues, we must take a comprehensive view. We have to think about the product in terms of eco-design. We have to think about materials. We have to think about the process and the value chains and the impact in terms of sustainability that the processes are having. We have to think of the circular economy, what happens after we consume the products, enjoy the products. The actions mustn't stop there. We have to keep going and move towards a circular economy. And we also have to be very creative and innovative in terms of regulation and how, for example, as associations or as companies or as governments, national, local, Congress, or however we can engage, with the different sectors and with consumers to promote opportunities for the green economy and progress towards a more sustainable industry. So I would like to start with the first two, which are products, eco-design materials, industrial process, and so on, and just give you a few examples of how innovation can lead to new solutions that are more sustainable. Here's just an example of an innovation in packaging, in which we start with one material and then it sort of evolves. This is an example of ketchup, to another material that uses plastic, which is much lighter and doesn't break. Then it evolves to another type of packaging in which less of the ketchup is wasted. And then we have a new packaging, which uses less materials, protects the product, and also generates less waste. Here's another example of innovation in packaging. This is a bottle that doesn't have a label, so it's easier to recycle. Labels usually have solvents and different types of glues and inks and so on, but the labels are very important to tell the consumer what the product is, nutritional information about the product, the brand of the product, and so on. So this is also an interesting innovation in which it's an eco-design solution for a sustainability challenge, which is what to do with labels. And this is actually a label-less packaging for water. And this is a similar product. In this case, it's glass, but I'm sure it could be applied to plastics also, which is a label that dissolves. So it doesn't have to be recycled. It's probably not made of materials that have a long biodegradation process. So it very quickly dissolves and biodegrades. So these are types of solutions that a lot of companies are thinking worldwide, how to improve their product, how to improve their materials to move towards a green economy and a more sustainable environment. Other examples, for example, in packaging, sorry if there are little typos and so on, Internet of Things, mentioned in the previous presentation. There's a big opportunity in Internet of Things, for example, in packaging that contains information through nanotechnology. For example, to ensure the product authenticity, so that there isn't like piracy and similar situations in which the product has the information that consumer can easily ensure that the product is authentic. It can also improve logistics. You can know where your product is, how it's moving in the logistics chain. And in that sense, it helps reduce waste because you know exactly where your product is. If it's, for example, if it's a food that needs to be in a cold environment, you know where it is, and if it's what's the status of the product. And so in that sense, it helps to reduce waste. It helps you keep better traceability of your products. There's also a lot of improvement, for example, in innovation, in using different types of additives, for example, oxygen or ethylene, absorbents, antibacterials, moist regulators, to better protect, because packaging actually protects food, but with these types of additives, it protects it even more and helps reduce waste. And when we help reduce food waste, not only is that an improvement for human beings' nutrition, but as you know, when waste ends up in landfills or dumps or whatever, the emissions produce global warming. So in that sense, packaging to protect food through these types of nanotechnology and innovations is also an opportunity towards that green economy that we're seeking. Also, packaging that's monomaterial. We still have in the market a lot of packaging that uses many layers, many types of materials, which is actually harder to recycle. So there's a lot of improvements and innovation in terms of monomaterial packaging that are reaching the markets and helping recyclability of some types of packaging, especially flexible packaging. And that is actually related to the next one, which are transparent solutions, in which the consumer can look at the product, but the product is protected. Usually when there's a packaging that you can't see what the product is inside, is because the packaging is actually protecting it from the light. But we're actually moving towards transparent solutions that keep those types of protective attributes of similar packaging. We have packaging that reacts to products. For example, meat, the packaging can tell you the state of the product that's inside, its expiration, and so on. And in that sense, it protects it better, and it reduces the waste of the product because you know exactly the state of the product and when it actually is going to expire. One of the huge challenges we have is the use of post-consumer recycled material, or PCR in products. That's obviously increasing very rapidly. If we want to advance towards a circular economy, it's not enough to separate waste and have a very effective recollection or waste management systems. That's not enough if there isn't a market that absorbs the post-consumption recycled material. And there are technical issues that are involved in using PCR, but there are many improvements in that sense. One of the huge challenges we have in terms of use of post-consumption recycled material is food grade products, to be able to incorporate recycled materials more and more into packaging that's used for food and beverages. Also, 3D printing for prototypes, it helps use less molds. It helps, for example, in thermoforming, you can do some experiments on prototyping with the plastics transformation processes, and in that sense, be more efficient when you try to test some products in the market. So you can try them many times, and it uses less resources in the product. In the second area, some innovations and opportunities in the plastic sector for the circular economy. As I mentioned, circular economy is one of the biggest challenges for the plastics industry, and I think one of the biggest transformations that we're living nowadays. In the last 10 years, circular economy in plastics has developed a huge transformation. Technologies are moving very quickly. Companies are investing massively in solutions towards a circular economy for plastic. Some of the innovations and opportunities that we see right now in terms of circular economy for plastics are new technologies for waste sorting. Waste sorting is one of the key issues because, as you know, when we throw our waste into the garbage can, it's all together. We have to sort it and separate and see what can be recycled into what recycling way. So there are many waste sorting initiatives and innovations that are moving in the market, which I think are very interesting. For example, waste traceability, waste that has barcodes or information in it that can help an equipment or a machine automatically separate it or sort it. Those are some innovations that we are seeing in the market. Use of information and communications technologies to improve waste collection, have a better traceability through ICTs is also something that is moving very quickly in the markets. Some of the traditional challenges that we have in mechanical recycling to improve recyclability is layer separation and color separation. There are many, for example, packaging that has many layers, many different types of plastics, metals, even paper. There are many improvements right now in separating layers and also separating colors. Development of new materials. We are now having, for example, materials that can be used almost in any type of plastics transformation process, but that actually come from waste. From, just to give you an example, from dirty diapers mixed with banana products and chicken, whatever, it creates a material that can be mixed with plastic and used to do plastic pipes, for example. So development of new materials is a very interesting issue and new opportunity potential for this sector. Also biodegradable materials. We also have different developments in terms of circular economy in using waste for energy generation or pyrolysis for new feedstocks and so on. And I would say probably the next huge innovation that we will have in plastic, and we are seeing it right now, but it's still not in a large scale globally, is chemical or advanced recycling, in which the plastic waste can actually be mechanically transformed back to the monomer, and the monomer then has a polymerization process. It becomes a polymer, but it's actually comparable to an original or virgin or petrochemical polymer, polyethylene, polypropylene, or whatever, polystyrene. So chemical or advanced recycling, I think, will be groundbreaking in the next few years. And now to end my presentation, my final point is to be very innovative in terms of regulation and engagement towards a more sustainable plastics industry. And just a few examples from what we're doing in the association in Acoplásticos. We have different initiatives that show that our perspective towards promoting a more sustainable plastics industry has to be analyzed within a very comprehensive strategy. So we're working on different areas which are summarized in these 4 initiatives. The first one is to have more information about the circular economy for plastic. We need market information. We need technology information, regulation information. We need information about who is developing what are the plastics recycling rates in Colombia, how they're growing. So we developed an observatory called Plastic, which has all the latest technologies and market information for the circular economy for Colombia. The second one is Dale Vida al Plástico, which says basically give new life to plastic. That is focused on generating consumer awareness about the importance of consumers to obviously not dump waste to the environment, but actually separate it or sort it correctly at home. Also Loop, which is from the Institute of Research and for Plastics and Rubber in Colombia, which was founded by Acoplásticos. They have an initiative called Loop, which basically seeks to promote eco-design in plastics products in Colombia through a selection of attributes and materials that they select to define if a product complies with certain criteria in terms of recyclability, and also to promote the use of post-consumption recycled materials in products. And then Go Plastics is our initiative that we have to promote a very dynamic recycling market in Colombia. We work with startups, we have crowdfunding initiatives, we do programs to help startups produce a better presentation of their initiatives, and we actually get them together with potential investors. So we try to be very creative in terms of how we address and how we engage with the markets, with the governments, with universities and so on, to move towards a circular economy. So basically, to sum up, I think there are many opportunities for the green economy in plastics. We have to work in improving the eco-design of products, searching for new materials that are more sustainable, improving processes to reduce carbon footprint, to generate better types of products and processes. We have to very rapidly move towards a circular economy, and also we have to be very creative in terms of regulation and engagement with all the stakeholders. So once again, thanks a lot for this invitation. I will I'm trying to, yeah, trying to get back to.
That's all good.
Yeah, no, so I just concluded my presentation. I'm trying to get back to stop the sharing my screen, but I can't actually find the way.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much, Daniel. Very interesting for sure. I think plastics one of the key industries that we talk about when we talk about sustainability and circular economy. So thank you very much for talking to us. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Tanya Wolf to join us for a quick presentation, talk a little bit about the Global Compact Network Thailand. Ms. Tanya, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Thank you so much. Maybe I like to talk without the slide to keep the time in control within 10 minutes. I just need to count down the time clock here. Otherwise, you can interrupt me anytime if I overtime. Thank you for inviting me. And on behalf of the Global Compact, we'd like to share the good challenge about how can we tackle the climate and biodiversity challenge in the Thailand. So we also like to gratitude to the SCAP who have contributed to the Leaders Summit this year in June, that we have first time to touch upon the biodiversity loss with the business sectors. So we gathering the leadership and thought together on how can we move and accelerating the business solution to tackle the climate and the biodiversity challenges, not only by Thailand, but that happened for the Southeast Asia, because you can imagine about the tropical area like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. We are in the area that we have a quite good reach of the biodiversity, and in the same time, it's a big loss. We had a lot of good data to show that we may not able to maintain and protect them. So, as an ambition to our work together on the Global Compact with the United Nations Global Compact, we have host together every year the forum, especially with the business sectors, over 100 of association members, to declare our commitment on how can we support all the business sector and government driving back to Thailand. We have a commitment toward the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And that time we had pledged the number of the commitments, number of projects. We had about $3 billion pledge toward the goal of this SDG within the year 2030 agenda. And now we also consider that the way that we like to go green together, we need to jointly announce the commitment of the national agenda for the Thailand net zero. We have pledged to reduce the net greenhouse gas emission by zero by the year 2050, or at least by latest the year 2070. In this regard, we're proud to contribute to the implementation of the national policies. We support our Prime Minister and the Minister of the National Resource and the Environment, and also the CSO team on reaffirm that Thailand, we had commit to the COP26 and COP27 again this year on meeting the achievement of net zero and go faster than ever. Let's say that we have achieved the carbon neutrality. Thailand, we now moving our target sooner to have a carbon neutrality by year 2050 and net zero by the year 2065. With this work, we are working directly with the ministers of the National Resource and Environment to confirm that how can we follow through and revise the national agenda and plan. So the policy advocacy and the work of the detailed policy, we are having a lot of good example. I will show you quickly. For example, follow up with the commitment on declaration last year. This year, we had confirmed of the reduce of the greenhouse gas emission by at least 8 million tons of the carbon dioxide, which is equivalent to the 1,600,000 cars disappear from the roads. We also like to calculate further on each year annually how much of the greenhouse gas emission reduction that we can consolidate together from the private sector in Thailand. So we hope that it's gonna be measurable. It's gonna be inspired to gain more attention from other SMEs and the company to join us. Now, moving forward this year on the Global Compact, we review another environment crisis and no less challenges and serious than the climate change. That crisis is the biodiversity losses. According to the WWF, in the last 4 decades overall, our plant and animal biodiversity has significantly declined, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region. The number of mammal, reptile, birds, and marine life reduced 68%. So let's say in our lifetime, we already see the remaining 1/3 of them. We already lost 2/3 of them. So with this regard, biodiversity and health ecosystem is a vital resource base for the virtual every economic sector. We know that the livelihood and the world population is depend on them. And another data that we convinced to the business sector is from the World Economic Forum that estimate as high as 50% of global economy or 44 trillion US dollar rely on the natural resource and the ecosystem. So we now moving forward to have a new way of calculating the business sector, which is the true cost of the natural capital. So we would like to introduce a nature-based solution and natural capital into the business sector. One of the key new milestone for us is we have to commit together with the national country agenda on how can we protect the loss. The degradation of the biodiversity and ecosystem facing the world today will only worsen with the effect of the global warming and may lead the competition of the natural resource disappear. So we hope that we need to improve a lot of policy. And of course, we tackle together with UNEP and national ONEP. There are organization of the government office head to pledge for another 30 by 30. You may ever heard about the names new target to protect the biodiversity loss and also protect the lands 30% and the ocean 30%. We work very hard this week and next week to bring another new agenda for the national. So now we're moving on the biodiversity loss. We have linked together about affecting to the marketing, financial mechanism to ensure that there are essential fundraising tools to work toward this goal. So with the UNDP, we work on the biofinance, and we are now working with the Climate Bond Initiative. Thank you for the NGO in UK that we are partnering to issue the guideline standard on the climate bond, green bond standard to Thailand team, and regulator like the stock exchange commissioners already adopt and agree that they would like to have a regulator to support the way of issue the bond to sustain the financing activities. And we're gonna have a new announcement from the Thailand Bank of Thailand early of January on taxonomy. How can we bring the incentive and tax to be sure that we could continue the sustainable linked bond, green bond, and also social bond in Thailand. With the support from the UNEP, I like to say that this is a partnership for the goal. We estimate that the investment in environment and protection for the world it would generate economic return up to 30 times. So that is so much value that we like to convince. So addressing the climate change and nature-based solutions such as conserving and restoring the forest, mangrove forest, and the coastal ecosystem is very good instrumental to achieve the Thailand net zero goals and improving economy and biodiversity protection at the same time. And last but not least, just last week we had the APEC meeting, and Thailand was the chair of APEC 2022. We host with the leadership of the APEC Economics 21 Economic Corridor, and the leaders has a meeting coming up, already had finished. We already drive the new concept of our economy and create a concrete result under the concept of bio, circular, and green. We call BCG, bio, circular, and green economic model, which we are pledged for another new era of driving the circular economy. across the APEC region, which is 21 country and or economic zone. That has never been more important than the way that we like to move across the political issues, international political issue. Now we try to set up the new agreement we call Bangkok Goals. If you are interested on this Bangkok Goal, I will send you the link and reference later soon on how can we get alignment of that 21 economic zones country on this bio-based circular and green economy. And if you want to grow the business and economic sustainably, if you want to pass on the beautiful world to the next generation, we need to protect the humanity together. And we hope that our policy advocacy like this will help at least is based out of our ability to solve the global warming and the biodiversity loss together. And thank you to give us time for this speaking. And if there are any question and good challenge comments, please feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. And thank you also to Ruben and Daniel for these very informative presentations. We will now move on to the question and answer session. So if you have any questions, please just raise your hand and unmute yourself and share your question. I'm being told I'm very echoey, so I'll try to move maybe a bit closer to my screen. I hope you can hear me okay. So yeah, let's start the Q&A. I can see there's already an interesting discussion going on in the chat. So maybe Miriam, could you start by sharing your question with everyone? And then maybe Ruben, could you also share your response and elaborate a little bit for everyone? Thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Yes, mainly the first question that raised to me is, first of all, thank you very much. This is very interesting and very interesting interventions. And I have a question for Ruben and Daniel from Colombia, and is, which advances do you highlight on circular economy policy in Colombia? And what is needed to advance even further in terms of public policies, but also private sector initiatives? Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. Ruben, do you want to share also vocally how what you already put in the back?
Sure. I try to address this on the chat, but as I said, the joint participation and discussion with the government and with different government entities has been really useful, especially to discuss, selected issues on different criteria has been, quite helpful for all of us. Of course, highly technical people, very capable of doing this. So we are very happy about it. We have reached and we have designed selected common spaces, of course, with different stakeholders to discuss different perspectives and structured policy frameworks. This is quite an example for the single-use plastic law, extended producer responsibility targets, and some other issues that are part of the policies that are currently under discussion. The idea is that we need to articulate not only with the government, but with some other actors in the process, as I said, to reach consensus on hard issues on circular economy, and of course, to validate the perspectives, because of some of them, you need to provide good arguments, of course, in every single discussion, and of course, that the idea is that the policy is feasible to implement, right? So this bottom-up approach, I think, is the best approach, to reach consensus. In order to improve current policies already on a circular economy, this is there are some laws already existing, and that they are quite we try to promote to improve certain issues on certain articles within the law that might be improved, of course, And you know, there are certain, and I said it here, the silo mentality sometimes at different sectors, and I'm not saying from the government, not saying from different stakeholders, that sometimes are, you know, they are really, really hard to discuss, you know, and especially to reach consensus. And for me, I'm from Andy, the idea is that we discuss with multiple actors, and this is quite difficult because you are taking the opinions and, you know, the perspective from across the sectors in Colombia, right? So, and we are not talking also, only in terms of affiliates or the organizations that are affiliated, but also in terms of academia, in terms of civil society. So these are the ones who provide really good input in order to, you know, enhance these policy actions on the ground. And of course, that they are viable to implement. Otherwise, if you establish, for instance, you know, unpredictable and unfeasible targets, then why are you designing this policy, right? So you need to reach consensus.
Thank you very much, Ruben. I believe the question was also addressed to Daniel. Do you also want to chime in here?
I think Daniel, his connection just disconnected. So do we have a question in the chat for Tanya as well? Miriam is asking whether Thailand applies green taxes on some productive activities. And if so, if you could give an example of good implementation in use of taxes. And if not, what do you think that would be made to implement this kind of policies?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We would love to have that tax, but we push so hard. It's coming next year, so I could not say it's already available. We also would like to use the kind of the issue of the tax policy to the carbon tax, which is a very good challenge. This is cannot approve by now. Next, I'd like to share you some other potential partnership and the policy. We had developed, I don't know whether I can show you the slide later on. It's a circular economy innovation ecosystem white paper, which is the policy advocacy that we have submitted to the government. And I think some of our team has shared, I had a presentation slide deck, which cannot talk tonight, but I hope that if there are anyone interested, I can further share that slide as well. The thing that we had incentive of the circular economy activity to incentivize the company is about industrial collaboration for the fund from the major companies. For example, if you like to have an agriculture products, which is a low carbon, how can we produce a low greenhouse gas emission products? So we are partnering with a company to support providing that fund. We have already issued the green bond and the fund over 50 projects across the business sectors. And we prioritize 4 business sectors to focus and zoom in to ensure that they can have a very good support. The first one is health and medical device, healthcare service. Second one is hospitality and the tourists, because Thailand is a good hub for the tourists. The third one is, of course, the energy and transportation. And the last one is agriculture and the food. So we already endorsed that policy in that 4 areas on business sectors. So next, I'd like to highlight another good resource that we invest is capacity building on the Researcher and Development Fund. We have the theme of the program with university and industrial collaboration on the research. I have a slide deck if anyone, I can share you later about which are the topic and projects related to the driving of the circular economy projects that already endorsed by the funding. We had last 3 years, a lot of good funding on bioenergy, biomass, to ensure that waste symbiosis happen in Thailand. And there are any circular economy, for example, second raw material research and the platform for the business to use the second source to second-hand materials, recycle not only the circular, but reuse them forever. Like we are having concept starting from 3R to be 12R. Currently, we adopt a new policy of the circular design for the business sector, that if there are newly established business, can they register the business with the new circular design with a life cycle analysis before they introduce a new product into the market. And the last but not least, for the supporting adopt this concept to the smaller business SME, we campaign with the SME Promotion Association to support building the capacity for the small business to learn about the circular design, that co-creating a new concept to them. Otherwise, they may not able to drive the new technology or innovation by themselves. So we are partnering with the association to support as well. That may be focusing on the beside the tag. The first one is funding. The second is researching. The third one is capacity building for the small business.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Do we have any more questions? Vivian, I believe there was a couple of questions that we received ahead of the webinar. Were they already addressed?
Indeed. We have actually questions for all the speakers, but let me pick one here. So we have one question that's actually directly to all, which is business often see government regulations around sustainability as an additional burden. In your view, how can governments ensure that the promotion of the green transition and green economy answers of the needs of the private sector, so they don't see this as a burden?
May I have a short intervention?
Of course.
Okay. We have partnering with the policy advocacy and the government to support, for example, labeling the products on the circular product. We got a lot of good support from the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Commerce to promote the product and export the product with the circular mark. So that certified can raise awareness in consumers with the labeling information and then identify the environment impact that declare the right to use environment, the right to healthy environments. So this supportive from the government help to motivate both the business sector and the consumer to change their behavior toward the circular economy.
Okay, thank you so much. Also, thank you for your offer to share some more documents on the various initiatives in Thailand. I think that would be very interesting, and we can share that with the follow-up recap on this webinar with everyone. In the interest of time, I think we'll need to wrap up the Q&A here. And we've already been going for over an hour, so let's have a short break of 5 minutes. So please all be back by 9:13. At least this is the time in Thailand right now. So 13 past, we get started again. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you had a good short break. We'll start now the second part of our event today. And this part is going to focus on more public-private dialogue. To join us here today, we invited business leaders who are actively working to advance the green economy. And we will have from them a short presentation, and we will then later be all together to have a discussion on business contributions and needs and government support for the green transition and a greener economy. First, I would like to invite Ms. Dora Sayo, ESG and SDG resident expert at 5G Catalyst Technologies from Thailand, to tell us a little bit more about the sustainable cities initiatives and how they're supporting the world in going greener. So Dora, if you're with us, I hope so. Yes, I see you there. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So hi everyone. So I'm Dora from 5GCT, and right now what we're doing at 5GCT is actually we're working with a few of the cities here in Thailand to work on getting them. Oh, so I won't have slides for this, so it's kind of like just explaining what we're doing. So what we're doing right now is we're working with a few of the cities in Thailand. Mainly right now is a city called Rayong. We're actually working with a sub-municipal in there to develop smart cities within Thailand. And the reason for this is actually I think a lot of people can see, you know, we're living in cities and often our quality of life isn't very good in cities. Personally, I just came back from the islands as well, because oftentimes when you're in big cities, it can get a bit overwhelming. And so then you try to go somewhere else where you can feel a little bit more at ease, let's say. So what we're doing is actually we're helping consolidate data within the cities so that governments can actually make better decisions on what they want to implement further within the cities that they are looking after. Of course, all of this, we also have challenges that we face within working with governments as well, because actually we operate as a startup, but seeing problems that we think need solving, that's why we're working with government officials and government entities to be able to do this. The thing is, governments often tend to have a lot of different things on their mind, but oftentimes as well, sometimes the data that is already currently within governments may not be optimal, an optimal data set for tech companies to continue and use that data to then build upon. So when this comes into play, oftentimes then what we also need to do with government entities is to actually go in and look at the data sets that they currently have and see how we can actually digitize a lot of that, so that we can then aggregate what is available there onto a UDP. So what we're looking at providing for governments is actually an urban data platform that aggregates a lot of the data that we have on hand. So data sets that we currently look at is actually a lot in the side of safety and security, first off. So that's a lot to do with security cameras and aggregating those. But as well as this, we're also looking a lot into looking at how to work with industrials within cities and looking at how to work with citizens within cities to actually reduce the amount of emissions that they're generating within the cities as well, and incentivizing them to better reduce the emissions that they are producing. Of course, this comes also with challenges. Oftentimes, then what needs to be in place is actually for the recognition of the emissions to be recognized by the governments. So right now, there's a lot of different ways that we are actually looking at this. One way is actually through blockchain. This actually makes it easier for us to track the emissions as well as to validate the emissions that are reduced. So this is what is currently being done in Rayong. And the blockchain part of it is actually, interestingly, in Thailand, in the suburbs of the city, we often have like agricultural areas in the suburbs of the cities. And so our initial kind of proof of concept is actually with farmers and measuring the reduction by getting them to switch the way that they're doing their farming. And by doing this, it actually reduces the methane emission that occurs during rice farming. And then we convert that into the amount of carbon of emissions that can be reduced. So this is kind of like what is going on right now. And our next step is actually looking at it more from an industrial point of view. And going into work with industrial areas within cities as well. So Rayong, the city that we are currently working with, they actually have many large industrial estates. So it's actually an industrial city, which is like next to a deep sea port, and a lot of like the petroleum companies are also within Rayong themselves. So right now we're looking at jumping in and helping the industrial parts of Rayong to actually be able to optimize this better. Right now, actually, other than this, we're working closely with UN Habitat to bring kind of, from now working with Rayong, this is the initial city that we're working with, but over a period of time, what we actually want to do is be able to tap in and work with other cities as well to better aggregate and then get cities to be able to compare themselves as well, because I think this is a big part oftentimes for different cities to actually want to know how well they're doing in comparison to other people. So this is the long-term plan that we have right now for 5GCT. And slowly in the process, we're also going to be aggregating other solutions into the platform to make it so that the lives of citizens can be better. So for example, telemedicine is currently now being aggregated into the platform so that the government will be able to see better information regarding healthcare for the people. People also have better access to healthcare, and then all of this can be tracked. And in the long term, what we're actually looking at is in the process of looking at like data sovereignty. So to make sure that, it's not the oftentimes people nowadays, we often worry about, where our data is going and if people are going to try to capitalize from our data. So this is kind of the next step that we're also looking at to make sure that data belongs to the person who's actually generating the data and not so much to a certain party. So this is, I guess, us in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Dora. And next, let me just 1 second. Okay, so next I would like to invite to talk to us and share a little bit about the work they're doing is Cindy Maratanashai from Hackathon Thailand, who is bringing diverse stakeholders together to share some of the challenges of the green economy. So Cindy, the floor is yours.
Hello, sawasdee everyone. If you allow me to share my screen, I have a few presentation. Thank you very much. And yeah, so I'm currently a CEO and a co-founder of Hackathon Thailand. To simplify this, we have 3 main services, which the first one is we run a hackathon event, which we focus on create social and environmental impact. So that's how we start. And recently this year, we started work with more with the corporate and with the startup. So we also have an incubation program for startup, and we run a corporate training program as well. And one of the things that's it was a very good opportunity that's follow me from the previous work, which is the business matching and deal flow exercise, which focus on decarbonize and creating net zero economy for Thailand. So these are the three main services that we are working on. So as you can see, it's like our hackathon events, we try to bridge the gap between that shortage of talents in green economies by bringing them to experience that how people from the industry just they work and engage them together with the policymaker as well. We have a program, a big program this year that called Environ Hack, which the Minister of the Environment himself become a judge on all the events that entirely run out 6 months from now on. And we also supporting on early stage startup that when the large corporate want to support the small startups by utilizing technologies, and also with the business matchings that we try to bridge the gap between the startup that want to scale with the larger corporate that want to support these and themselves also using this technology to decarbonize their carbon footprint as well. So not only this, but we also run a lot of workshop with the government as well to help them understand more the entrepreneur challenge. For example, with the ground transport businesses, and we run a need assessment for all the startups in our sandbox program. And recently we just dived into sustainable fishery as well to help them bring back all the ghost gear back from the ocean into circular economy. So the topic today is, if I can talk to the policymakers that I need the public sector to support, I would say these startup, they want to scale, right? And what they need more is the capital. And sometimes these large corporate or large conglomerate also want to support these startup as well. But these startup, they aren't ready yet. So I think the main player can be the public sector. The public sector can play a big role as a buyer, and we want to see them to support on that their government procurement process. For example, include in the TOR that if they want to procure, if the large corporate want to get some big government project, they have to include the startup and small enterprises that produce the low carbon products and services as well. And yeah, in summary, so I want to see more the private sector to be a big customer to help them and closing the gap on the startup funding, especially on the smaller ticket size around 30,000 US dollar. So this is a huge gap that's difficult to find this mechanism here in Thailand. So you have to understand that these small startups, they have a good product, they cannot compete with the current market where price and become a big decision, right? So yeah, and I think that's from my point of view. We can exchange more later in the breakout room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. This is very interesting for sure. And I think since we are kind of still a small group, we will all stay together in this room and have a public-private dialogue. All of us are here. Just a quick thing before we start, for all the speakers and participants, try to speak as slow as possible. I am also reminding myself of that, so that the translators can translate from English to Spanish and go all the way around. And I think to start, actually, for all the community members that are here and participants, if you would like to comment on something, not ask any question, please, you can raise your hand, or you can write in the chat, or you can just call us our attention in some way, and we will give you the floor. So please do feel free to do so. And I think you touched on a very important point, which is kind of what can the government do to then support all the private sector in this going green part. I think this is a question I would also have for Dora, in terms of how do you think that government action could help you in the effort that you're having right now?
Cindy, do you want to go first? So we, okay.
Yeah,
I can...
so yeah, Dora, you can go. Yes.
Okay, sure. So I think in a moment ago, the question was regarding like how the government could actually help support. And I think a big part of this is actually within the policy that we're looking at. And I think a lot of the times, sometimes policies are in place, but very little companies know about it. A lot of the times the policies might not yet be in place. And I think another big part of this is actually right now what we see is I think a lot of the private entities are actually kind of really cranking up and wanting to move towards net zero. But then a lot of the times, like when the policies aren't in place or it might not be super clear, then what happens is there's a little bit of a struggle for companies to really like understand how they can best, like the intention now is there, but then the companies may be a bit stuck on how they can actually make that intentions like come to reality. So I think definitely like putting the right policies in place, and then also kind of making sure that people actually understand those policies, I think might actually be a bigger part of actually having the policies in place as well. So I think Cindy can actually help support on this part. Like a lot of the times right now, we're seeing a lot of people being really interested in the area of like carbon credits and emission reduction, but there's also still a lot of confusion regarding how to actually calculate that and if cross borders can actually be done. So I think that's a very big part of that. Another interesting part would also be with regards to and I think in a way this also counts as policy, but I feel like a lot of the times in my field of work where we're working a lot with cities, the way of budget allocation for the cities itself doesn't really encourage for private entities to be able to work with cities that well, because oftentimes we're looking to go in and help change things at a rather quick pace, but oftentimes budgeting takes a couple of years to be able to put into place. And oftentimes, especially in Thailand, when the government buys or allocates money towards certain projects, there's often not a maintenance aspect to it. So this goes back to what Cindy was talking about a moment ago about the TOR that is usually required for government work here in Thailand. A TOR will be generated, but oftentimes within the TOR itself, there might be things that should actually be considered, but not in the TOR. And that makes it a bit difficult for private companies to then, make sure that we're able to generate what the government wants within their budget and make sure that it survives in the long run as well. So I think by getting the government to be a bit more mindful of that aspect of things would be very helpful in encouraging more public-private partnerships to actually occur, especially in the sustainability space, I would say, because that's relatively new for a lot of the cities that we're working with as well. Cindy?
Yeah, so that's a lot of work for the government, from the government itself, like from the federal and also from the local government as well, to like, yeah, I think they should play a role model in the way that they want to support green economy, started by supporting change the way that they procure, change the way that they look towards like green event, you know, like how to arrange like a event, organize the event with more low carbon aspect of purchasing, or all of this is I want to see the government to like become a champion in this. In Thailand, we see that the private sector is more active on this, but when we looking at the number of the buildings, the number of the like departments, the numbers of the government agencies, actually these are like they all of them, they are separate around the country, right? We want to see them as a main like purchaser to support these small SME. So these SMEs, so that they can survive themselves without seeking any funding or without like become in debt of like of a bank loan, for example. This is the first thing to help them. If in the context that in Thailand, in the context that I would say we don't have so many VC or impact investor that much to support these small startups and small SME, that they brings their own like community wisdom. For example, I met one of the entrepreneurs that they produce a paper from corn waste and from rice waste from after agriculture. They create all these, but their paper cannot compete in the current market, either in like souvenir and gift business, and or even on using as doing business with these paper, this handcraft. So how that like government really support these to, you know, like help them survive by become a frequent purchasers, that I really want to see that. So these small entrepreneurs, that they can scale themselves in terms of the operations, in terms of the manufacturings, and then later, yeah, they can become a partner with the larger corporation. I see a lot that the large corporation also, they really like this startup. Oh, they like this startup. They have the algorithm to optimize the energy usage in the building, but they are very small team, for example, and they want to see this equipment produced in mass. But how come like a small startup aged like 30s of them, like 3 of them can scale that a lot and to support the aspiration of the large corporation in decarbonization, right? So both sides have these risks. I want to see more if the private sector can come and help on this, like build a platform to help them like discuss. Or one thing that we did at the Decarbonize Thailand Startup Sandbox is our program won't let the startup and the corporation like discuss on the deal themselves. We always believe that that's have to be an intermediary to help both sides understand the risks and help communicate the way of work. There's so many times that startups say, oh, I want to quit this program because I don't see that how the corporation want to pay me on working on the POC, to find the proof of concept or the pilot. I am a smaller company, but I have to pay everything just to do the pilot. Why these larger corporations don't pay it? The larger corporations, they say, oh, there's the risk there. If this is investment, they didn't show up any outcome that to prove the net zero. So that's why I say we always need an intermediaries to help facilitate these deals floor, to make them understand, to help them understand that what are the learning that's both sides can have through all this journey. And there could be some other opportunities along the way, even though these pilot or even though these proof of concept projects fail, right? So we also don't have much of parties that working like me on a creating opportunity and platform. I think like in Europe or in the United States, there are more intermediaries like this to help, either as an NGOs or either as a government arms to do this work. Yeah, so that's from my experience, and I do believe that the younger generation right now, they very active, want to support or do something. And I ever heard a lot about, actually we want a green job platform here, for example, but this thing also we need the cooperation to make it more visible, like our company have these green job available for you, for example. I think this will help like to my country to have more talents in these fields. Yeah, so otherwise everyone will go into the crypto market. We all do. We want more people work in this sector, right? So yeah.
Thank you, Cindy. That's really interesting. I think I heard yeah, I think what you brought up about the need to have someone play this intermediary role between the ones with the great ideas and the innovative ideas and those that can bring it to scale, and how can we help actually bring these initiatives to scale? I think that's a really great question, especially when we are talking about green transition, which is something that requires a lot of innovation to happen. So thank you very much. And also, Dora, you talked about something that is also something we also hear a lot, which is the need to communicate clearer and better between government and companies. So I would have a follow-up question for you. It's just like, how do you think that the governments can actually get better at communicating with businesses? Because I think a lot of effort goes into trying to communicate, but sometimes there's a disconnect between the two sides. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think it would be interesting. I think a lot of the times there's not a lot of reach out into the industries, right? Is that what they call it? So like for certain industries, we'll have associations that are already there, but I feel like a lot of the times the reach out into the associations aren't there. So interestingly, I was just talking to another a person in a very different industry, and it was steel, and he was actually the president of the Steel Association in Thailand, and he was very clueless about what would be possible or what he can do to actually make all the companies within the Steel Association transition to like a greener way of doing things, and he was very like lost and confused about it. And personally for me, I felt like, wow, like as a president of like a certain association, that there are a lot of emissions associated with like that industry itself, but never to have had like the communication with the associations and governments that are looking after certain impact related issues. So I think definitely reach out into the associations, and also then get the associations to be the one who further communicates or work within the companies within the association itself. I think that's one big part that can be done. As well as this, I think I know like a lot of the times there are a lot of like events that are set up, but then I feel like it's also very like not a lot of people will know so much about the events, and so that I think that's also maybe a bit more marketing in the events where they actually give out the information that would also be super helpful. Because I feel like right now it's a lot of people who are already know a lot about the impact side of things that are joining the events that are being set up. But I mean, what you kind of really want is not just like the people who are already very knowledgeable about it, right? But you want to kind of pull the masses into that as well. So I think possibly like a strategy to be able to pull the masses in to understand what is going on will actually then start to make everything snowball a bit more and get more people jumping into actually creating change in, you know, the next 10 years that we actually need the change to happen in. Yeah, so I think around that.
Perfect. If anyone would like to say something, I hear some. No, Benjor, you shared a comment and a question here in the chat to the business leaders that are here. Would you like to talk and share your question?
Hello, everybody. My question goes to the business participant present here today. Transition to green economy, it's a better way forward to reduce carbon emissions and all, but the cost, if you look from the point of SMEs, they have to invest into, when it comes to transition into green economy, from my perspective, I feel that they have to do innovations and invest into better technologies, which is going to be expensive, and definitely it's going to increase the cost of production and increase the prices of product and services. So simple example I can see is the world has come up with electric cars, but still if we compare the prices, it's still far way ahead and expensive than the car that still uses fossil fuels. So similarly in that line, even the technologies, if they want to transition into like go green, they have to invest into better technologies. So that's going to cost a lot for them. And being in SME, they don't have a fund, so mostly they have to rely on their own personal savings or do crowdfundings, or at least that much that's all they can do. So it's going to be an expensive issue for them. And also listening to the earlier presenter, like Mr. Daniel, who talked about innovation in packaging and labeling. I've seen in his presentation that there was an innovation, like there was no label on the bottle of water, mineral water. Instead, it's instead of having a labeling, it's done on the bottle itself, and also the labeling that dissolves on its own. It's a good thing, but people nowadays they look at the products that are more attractive, and products that are attractive are made by the labels. So I mean, it's going to be cost it's going to be expensive for especially for small and medium enterprises. So I want to listen from the business leaders that are present here, what kind of policies that the government should come up with, so that they can, especially small and medium enterprise people, the small and medium enterprise leaders can, you know, don't have to burden much on the cost that's going to cost them by going green. So what kind of policies that the government should come up with in order to make them, you know, to make them interest into go invest into green innovations and investments.
Perfect, thank you, Pedro. And Dora, Cindy, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I think I would say a big part of that is actually the financial aspect of things. So I mean policies to get people to understand a little bit more about like regenerative financing as well, right? Because I mean I think EV, like electric vehicles, are a very good example. Like here in Thailand, what we see a lot is people buying electric vehicles, right? And then immediately thinking that they're actually doing a lot more better for the world. But I mean, in Thailand, I mean, our power mix is like, we're I think 98% fossil fuels. So I mean, even with electric vehicles, we're not actually doing that much better for the world itself, or possibly even worse than, you know, just using the normal vehicles. So I think with the right like if the going back to the policy in place of like, well, you know, if we were to switch to EV, is there also the financing in place for people to actually buy this? And I think two is also the infrastructure that would be in place to support this, because I think in a lot of different countries, like you'll see, you know, the public wanting the private, they're both P's, so I'm very like you see the private wanting to go you know, to transition to a greener economy, but then a lot of the times the infrastructure is not in place, or the financial incentives aren't in place for people to actually convert over. Because I mean just as Mr. Pedjor mentioned, I think like you know, if the finance was there and then we have a little bit more business innovation, what we're actually seeing a lot right now, I think everywhere in the world, is actually the ability to, rather than buy electric vehicles, we're looking at like the rentals of electric vehicles, because actually that then truly makes it a bit more circular as well, right? So when you're done using it, you're probably not going, you know, you can either let other people continue renting it, or the maintenance actually goes to the companies that are actually the ones who are selling the cars itself. So then there's less worry of how will you have to, you know, look after your car once you're done using it. So there's like the business innovation aspect, which I think it would also be good for governments to actually do education programs to get people to understand a little bit more that, oh, how can we innovate on a business perspective rather than having to innovate on a technical perspective, to the financing in place to then make it so that people who are actually doing things that benefit the environment or benefit society can have, you know, not such a high interest rate, or you know, encourage allow for loans to happen with a business plan and possibly a certain amount of collateral, but also maybe less so than the typical business, because in the end this is going to be very different from normal businesses. And finally, infrastructure. So I think that's like the three big parts that I can think about if we're talking about in relation to the case that Mr. Penjor brought up. Yeah, so that's on my side. I'm going to pass it to Cindy.
Yes, I'd like to add on some more example, and I think Thailand has made a very good move in supporting electric vehicle this year by promoting an incentive of electric vehicle. So what happened after Thai government has said they will reduce the tax of importing, or also support the manufacturers with some certain condition of like the company have to establish the manufacturings of electric vehicle here, and then there are some disincentives helps to brings like a great demands. So this can be invisible demands, but it helps all the cars manufacturers. They are so excited about to come to Thailand and promote that to become like a new hub of electric vehicle. And what I can see is that more and more startup looking to add the the complementary or technology to be used that help these electric vehicles drive the cost down. I mean, as the innovator themselves, they weren't looking at, oh, how that I'll become an innovate and want to like to sell the car themselves. What happened here? I speak in the context of Thailand, right? There are some big major car manufacturings here, the Japanese company and some of the Europe and American company here. But then what they are looking at is that these startup look into some aspect of how that they can use the technology that they are excel to drive the cost out in the future. For example, we find like some small startup, they say there are cheaper electric cars like 2-seat of like a small personal vehicle from China. But the problem is that these car manufacturer didn't have their air conditioning system coming with. So the consumers, the buyer have to find a AC system to install themselves. And these startups say, okay, what can we do like to innovate on that part, right? So make a momentum of this by promote, by bring in the incentives to like make the larger corporation. So that's why I say that how to make this ecosystem work together, this momentum, I think the government that can bring in the incentives is very important. When we look at the bigger scales, like in energy sector as well, the SME here in Thailand, I would say that if they have to pay electricity bills more than around like 1,000 USD a month, they are now able to get some of a like low interest rate loan to install the solar rooftop here as well. The government didn't do anything except increasing the electricity price, and that drives the SME that they have to move quick. And it is something that's interesting as well. They didn't incentivize at all, but make like challenges all these manufacturers, like create the environment that they have to adapt very fast. And at the same time, the financial sectors make a big move by, okay, we have this type of program loan for SME. 2 or 3 years ago, when I started working in the clean energy sector and support a startup, the first question would be like, why these commercial banks only have the program to support the large solar project? They didn't have like a program that to have a loan for the smaller SME to install solar rooftop at all. But once the government increased the electricity price, we see the financial sector also have this program, and that's become, you know, the tensions for this SME to start doing this with the help with the financial sector that have these type of products come out as well. To summarize my my answer, I would say it depends on what they really like to target, to allow the SME to like create innovation and commercialize that innovation is one thing. To support electric vehicle, there's another thing as well. I have another example from the workshop that we discussed with like more than 40 buses company here in Thailand. 80% of them are family businesses, and some of the buses running like from Bangkok to Chiang Mai or Bangkok to Phuket, something like that. And they still based on fossil fuels. And some of these bus age more than 10 years and based on fossil fuels. They also really want to transform themselves into electric bus as well. But that's a very intense capital that they need to find, right? And that not viable in terms of a return of investment. One thing that I heard from them is that they think the business model have to change. Instead of allow these company to invest in the new buses, but if the government want to purchase all these buses and allow these the entrepreneurs to become an operator, this is something that they mention on this, so that the country will transition into like a green transportation, why these family business survive, right? And they can later on gain more knowledge in electric bus. They have more knowledge and they will able to innovate later. So yeah, I like to end my answer with this, and I hope these examples help. Thank you.
It helped a lot. Thank you very much, Cindy. That's yeah, very interesting. I think we're talking about the governments needing to create the environment where it makes sense to switch to green, either by incentivizing or make it harder to continue not to be green. I think that's a very important point. And I think with this, we have run out of time, so we're coming to the end of today's event. Before we go, I'd like to hand over to Jonathan, who has a little bit to talk to you. Thank you, Jonathan. Go ahead.
Thank you, Vivian, Elena, and thank you to all the COP and the speakers as well. We really appreciate support. I've been quite quiet over the past two webinars, so just introduce myself quickly. I'm Jonathan Wong. I'm the Chief of Technology Innovation at the UN Commission for Asia and the Pacific, based here in Bangkok. And I really I'll be very brief, by the way, because I know I'm keeping those of you in Latin America from your breakfast, and I'm keeping those of you from Asia from your bed. So I will be very brief, but I just wanted to kind of outline kind of the next steps for this COP this year, and maybe just hint at what's coming next year as well. I know we're probably not thinking about next year and just trying to get all our work done before Christmas, but I just want to kind of touch upon next year as well. I think firstly, I think as many of the COP will know, we have an in-person event in Bangkok at the UN headquarters for Asia and the Pacific here in Bangkok on the 13th and 14th of December. Is that right, Vivian? I always get the dates wrong. 13th, 14th December.
That's correct.
Which will be more broadly on this notion of business innovation for the SDGs. And it was really good to kind of actually hear some of the topics that some of our speakers raised, actually. Things like, I heard social entrepreneurship several times. I heard impact investing and the need to drive investment into the green economy. And this event in December will really touch upon a broader agenda around how business can be a force for good and indeed a catalyst to meet the ambitions of the SDGs. Of course, we'll be looking at the green transition of business, which will be a core part of the agenda that this COP have been working on. But we'll have other sessions as well covering how government's promoting social enterprise, impact investing, looking at how government's supporting women and youth entrepreneurs. And yes, so just to say, yeah, we very much welcome you all to Bangkok. And if you haven't got back to Vivian and Elena yet on your travel arrangements, particularly from Latin America, because I know these things can take a while to sort out, but do get in touch, because we would really welcome you to Bangkok. As nice as these webinars have been, it would be good to see everybody in person and really spend some time with you all in person, and indeed for you to kind of enjoy Thailand and Bangkok as well. December's the best time of year to come. But Thai colleagues will know more than I, but that is my view of having been here a few years. Also at the event, we'll be launching 2 reports. One specifically looking at how governments have, I heard incentives several times, try to nudge business to think about, if you like, profit and purpose alongside that. And we'll also be launching a report on the green transition of business, and particularly focusing on the 10 countries that have been part of this community of practice. And thank you for those of you who have contributed some case studies and peer review of that report. That will be launching there. So for that reason alone, it would be great to have you all at the event for that as well. And just to say that this event will go beyond the 10 countries as well. We'll have kind of representation from a broader membership of the Asia Pacific region. So from the broader Asia region, indeed possibly from the Pacific as well. So yeah, in short, I'll try and sell this to you. It'll be very exciting, very relevant, broader agenda, broader country government, and Thailand is a wonderful time to come in December. So do get back to Elena and Vivian. As to what next, just so you know kind of where this is all heading from an SCAP perspective, 2023 is quite a big year for Asia in many ways in terms of government policy. I think firstly, for SCAP, we work with 62 countries in Asia Pacific, spanning as far west as Turkey, far southeast of the Pacific Islands. And we have an intergovernmental committee where we bring 62 countries together, where we'll be talking about the green transition. And a lot of the work and contributions and insights we've gathered from this COP, we will take to those intergovernmental deliberations between 62 countries to try and strike UN resolutions and commitments on this agenda with those countries. So just so you know kind of the picture and the bigger picture that we're aiming towards. But of course, next year is also a big year for several other intergovernmental platforms. So India has the G20 as an example, and we're working very closely with the India government at the moment around how we could put sustainability business on their agenda. Similarly, Japan has the G7 presidency starting in January, and we're working with them on how they can promote impact investment and investment in the green economy as well. And finally, the ASEAN presidency shifts to Indonesia next year, and we're in active conversations with the Indonesian government at the moment around what they can do to support kind of agendas like social entrepreneurship, youth entrepreneurship, women's entrepreneurship as well as the green transition of business. So yeah, that's kind of maybe, again, the next step in December. Welcome you all there. But just so you know, again, really a huge thank you to you all for taking time out of your breakfast or bedtime for sharing these insights with our team. We found it incredibly valuable, and they will be going somewhere. And these intergovernmental platforms, which again usually is prime ministers, economic ministers kind of level, is where we'll be taking a lot of this agenda, and of course recognizing your contribution to all of that as well. So I promise to stop there. I don't know, I'll hand back to you, Vivian, for any kind of closing housekeeping messages or any other things, but just to say, yeah, really welcome you to Bangkok. It will be fun. We guarantee you. And do get back to the team and reach out to me as well if you have any questions or queries about the event. Thank you. Vivian, back to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think yeah, I think that's fantastic, and you said a lot of the things I wouldn't say, which is I was looking very much forward to seeing you in December. And just as a housekeeping, after this, we will be following up with the summary of what was discussed today, and we'll be sharing all the information in our platform. So if you have not joined our platform yet, please do. And just a huge thanks to all of those who have shared with us, and thank you very much, Cindy and Dora, for being with us today. And that's it. See you guys in December.
Great. And thank you, Vivian and Elena. Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh yeah, please don't forget to answer our poll. Thank you. Bye-bye.